Okay, so here we have the first question where some ratios are given, dog to cat and then fish to dog, and then they're asking to find out the ratio between cats to fish, which we can see in the question are not directly related. We know that dog to cat ratio is 5 ratio 3, and then from fish ratio dog is 6 ratio 1. Now we have to somehow relate cats to fish. And what common thing we can see in both ratios is dogs. So in these types of questions, what we do is we try to make the d value same or the common value a same number. In ratios, we can just multiply and divide. So how about I just multiply this ratio by 5. So in order to make d the same value, since there we have a 5, we make it 5 over here as well. And ratios have their own rules, so that means if I multiply a 5 here, I have to do that on the left side as well. So it becomes 30 ratio 5. And now d was 5 here and d is 5 here. Now they're the same numbers, so I can just combine them and write. I can write d ratio c ratio f. Since they are both 5, I can just write it to be 5. Ratio c is 3, f is 30. Now, since I had to find the ratio between cat to fish, I can just take this relation. Cat ratio fish is 3 ratio 30, and then they said that we have to write the answer in the simplest form. So 3 ratio 30, I can just divide by 3 like on both sides. So it becomes 1 ratio 10, and that's the simplified version because we cannot simplify it further. Okay, next we have a very similar question to this, which also says that A ratio B is 4 ratio 5 and B ratio C is 3 ratio 2. Now we have B common in between both of them, and we have to find out A ratio B ratio C. A similar type of question here as well. Whatever is common, we have to make that value the same. So A ratio B is 4 ratio 5, and then B ratio C is 3 ratio 2. Now here there in the previous question I could see I could just multiply this by 5 to make the d to make d's the same. Here I can see that I cannot find anything. I multiply to 3 to make it a 4, to make it a 5, and I cannot multiply anything with 5 to make it a 3. So here we just multiply 3 ratio 2 with 5, this thing, and then we just multiply 4 ratio 5 with this thing, so times it by 3, times it by 3, and that will just become 12 ratio 15 A ratio B, and then B ratio C will become 15 ratio 10. Now, since I see that 15 matches, B values are matching, I can just compress it and write it into a single ratio form. A ratio B ratio C would just become 12 ratio 15 ratio 10. And if you if you can see if you can simplify it, but I don't think we can simplify it further. 12 ratio 5 ratio 10, all three of them do not come in the same times table, so that is the simplified version. So 12 ratio 15 ratio 10 would be the answer over here. Okay, so here we have another question where we have A person, B person, and C person. They share 66 pounds. And we know that A ratio B is 9 ratio 5. So I'll just write it down. A ratio B is 9 ratio 5. And then we know B ratio C is 2 ratio 1. We basically have to make sure that these two values there are the same numbers, because we need to know the relationship between A, B, and C, all three of them, in order to find out how much alpha gets. And here we can clearly see that the numbers are not the same for B, and we can make it same so that we just get a common relation, that's A ratio B ratio C. So in order to do that, as I told you, we can just multiply these, basically try to make them the same, and here we can just take this number and then times it here, times it by 5, times it by 5, take this number, times it over here, times it by 2, times it by 2, and then that becomes 18 ratio 10, and then 10 ratio 5. And now as we can see that the b, which was common between both the ratios, is the same, we can just write it to be a compressed in the compressed connected form, which is just 18 ratio 10 ratio 5. Now, if you see, all three people, they just share this 66 pounds, right? And A gets 18 parts, B gets 10 parts, and C gets 5 parts. That means in total, let's find out in total how many parts of 66 were done, out of which A got 18 parts, B got 10 parts, and C got 5 parts. So first let's add up all the parts. So we'll just do 18 add 10 add 5, which would be 18 plus 10 28, 28 plus 5 33. So 33 total parts were done, and of what value? 66. So we'll just do 66 divided by 33 to get the worth or value of one part, which would just be 2. 66 divided by 33 is 2. Now let's see the question. So how much does Alfie get? So we need to find out how much this A person gets. So we know that out of the total 33 parts of 66, A is getting 18. And we know the value of one part. We know the worth of one part. So in order to find out how much A gets, we'll just do A times 2. And A we know is 18. So it would just be 18 times 2, which is just 36. And that means that Alfie gets 36 pounds out of 66. Okay, then we have another question where we're similar type of question, but the total is not given. But we know a condition that will help us find out how much sweets does Ellie get. Okay, we have D, E, and F. They share some sweets, and we know D ratio E is 7 ratio 3. So let's write it down. D ratio E is 7 ratio 3, and then we know that D ratio F is 4 ratio 5. Now, again, we have to make a relationship between them. In order for to do that, we have to make sure the common term has the same value. So I'll still try to make them the same. So I can just take this 7 times it over here times 7. I have to do it on the other side. I take this 4 times it by here. I have to make sure I do it on the other side as well. So it will just become 28 ratio 12, and then this will become 28 ratio 35. Now as I can see that the values are same for the D values, the common values, the common alphabet, its value is the same. I can just write it in the compressed form. D ratio E ratio F would just be 28 ratio 12 ratio 35. Now, now we know this statement. This will help us find out the basically the value of what Ellie gets. For that, we should know basically if the question says total, we'll just add these values and then divide by the total to get the worth of one value, and then times it by their respective ratios to find out how much each person gets, as exactly we did in the previous question. Now in this question, the problem is that the total value is not given, but we have a condition. Let's try to figure something out from that condition. So we know D ratio E ratio F is 28 ratio 12 ratio 35, and we know a condition that F gets 21 more sweets than D. So we know that F gets 21 more sweets than D, so let's assume D gets X. All right, and then we know F gets 21 more, so I can just write it as X plus 21. Now if I just write D ratio F separately, D ratio F was 28 ratio 35, and also it's X ratio X plus 21. Now I can just convert this thing into fraction and work out the value of X. For that, I'll just know what E gets, and then that will basically help me find out. We'll be able to find out what D gets, and then that will help us find out what E gets as well. So in order to convert this ratio into fraction, we'll just do 28 over 35. That's this ratio converted into fraction. And since we know they're equivalent, I can just put an equal to sign in between, and then I'll just try to make this thing a fraction as well. So that would just be x over x plus 21. Okay, now I can just multiply, just cross multiply in order to solve for x. So it will become 28 times x plus 21, and then we have is equal to 35x, and that would just become 28x. So 28x plus 28 times 21. Let's see what that is. That's 588, and it's equal to 35x. And now what we can do is we can just collect the like terms, make sure they go to the one side. I can take this 28x and minus it to the other side. So 588 would just become 35x minus 28x, and that would just be 7x is equal to 588. Now in order to find out what is the value of x, we'll just divide. So 588 divided by 7 would make it 84. So we know that x is 84, which shows that what this D person was getting was 84, and we can just remove this x now and write 84 here, and we can just remove x plus 21 over here, and we can do 84 plus 21, and let's see what 84 plus 21 is. So that's just 105. So 105. Now the question basically asked for how much E gets, how much Ellie gets. So let's assume E is getting Y. We don't know yet, we're finding that. We can use any of the ratios. For example, let's take D to E. Again, let's take D to E relation to find out how much Ellie gets. So I'll just scroll up a bit, and it would just be D ratio E. We know it's 28 ratio 12, right? And we know that it is also 84 ratio Y. So I can just convert them back into fraction. So it will just become 28 over 12 is equal to 84 over y. Now I can just again cross multiply, so it will just become 28y is equal to 12 times 84. Let's see what that is. 12 times 84, that's just 1008. We can just find out what is the value of y. So it's just 1008 divided by 28, and if we try to divide it by 28, we get 36. So y is 36, and if we go back, y was actually what Ellie was getting, and the question was also asking how much Ellie gets. So the answer to this question would just be 36. Okay, again, a very similar type of question. We are given with A ratio B, which is 3 ratio 7, and we are given with A ratio C, which is 4 ratio 3. Now, we can see this time we have A values the same, like A alphabets the same in both ratios, and we have to make sure we make a relation between them, and in that, in order to do that, we have to make sure the A values are same. And I can just take this 4 times it over here times by 4 times by 4. I can just take this 3 times it over here times it by 3 times it by 3. Now 3 times 4 makes it 12 ratio 7 times 4 makes it 28. 4 times 3 makes it 12, and then 3 times 3 makes it 9. Now since I can see A values are the same, I can just write it into the combined form. So A ratio B ratio C would just become 12 ratio 28 ratio 9. Now, since we had to write our answer in the simplest form, can we just simplify this a little? Well, we cannot simplify it, so that is the simplified version. And that's it. Again, this type of question, you can just take a screenshot and try it as your homework. Okay, then we have another question, which is there are red sweets, blue sweets, and green sweets in a bag. We have the ratio between the red sweets and sweets that are not red. We have the ratio between green sweets and the sweets that are not green. So I'll just write it. Red ratio not red is 2 ratio 3, and then we have green ratio not green is 6 ratio 19. Now you can pause the video and think if this form will help us solve the question. The question is asking for red ratio blue ratio green. So that means red to blue to green. Let's see if it helps. Okay, did it help? Okay, in my opinion, it won't help that much. So, in this type of question where there are a little vague statements given, for example, red to sweets that are not red, green to sweets that are not green, we introduce a new variable that is total. Okay, now see. Um, According to the first statement, can I write red ratio total number of sweets is 2 ratio 2 plus 3, because according to the first statement total is 5. Okay, same thing let's do for the second statement as well. So we know green ratio, not green we know, but how about I just introduce the same variable total? 6, so green 6 ratio the total 19 plus 6 25. Now if you see, this question has become very similar to what we were doing before. So we have three variables and we have relation between RT and GT. So that means we can just make total variable the same number and we will get the relationship between red to total to green. Let's see. So I can just, since I need to make the total number the same, so I can just times this by 5. And then I have to do the same thing over here. So this would become 10 ratio 25, and then this would stay 6 ratio 25. So I know I can just write it into a simple form or a combined form now. Red ratio total ratio green would just be 10 ratio 25 ratio 6. Now, since the question asks for red ratio, blue ratio, green, and not red ratio, total ratio, green, so I can just work out the value of blue now. Now, since I know total is 25, green out of which is 6, red out of which is 10, so I could just do total minus red minus green to work out what blue is. So, total is 25 minus red is 10 minus 6 would give us the value of blue. And if we do 25 minus 10, that would just be 15. 15 minus 6 would just be 9. So blue is 9. That means red ratio blue ratio green will just become 10 ratio 9 ratio 6. So introducing a variable like t helps a lot in solving this question. Okay, this would be the last question that we'll be doing in this video, and this is very similar to what we did here. If you can see, a football team plays some games in a season. Each game has a win, draw, or loss. The ratio that they win the game and they don't win is 9 ratio 3, and they lose the game, then they didn't lose is 1 ratio 7. So let's write win ratio not win, and then lose ratio not lose. Now in that case we have 9 ratio 7 and then 1 ratio 7. And if you see, it's this form is not helping us. It's just four completely different relations. What we can do is we can just introduce the total variable here as well. I told you whenever there will be a vague statement like this, when to not when or red not red, we'll just introduce a total variable. So how about I just write when ratio total according to the first statement. If they won 9 and they didn't win 7, that means winning would be 9 and total 9 plus 7, that's 16. And then over here we can just write lose and then ratio total. So in this case we know it's 1 ratio 7, so losing is 7 and total would just be 1 plus 7, that's 8. Okay, now we can just, in order to make a relationship between winning, total, and losing, we can just make sure we times, we make the total value the same. So in order to do that, I can just times 2 over here. I have to do the same thing over here as well. So it will become win ratio total ratio lose, it would just be 2 ratio 16. So write win ratio total ratio loss, that would just be 9 ratio 16 ratio 2. And now let's read the statement. They're saying given that the team played less than 50 games, work out the highest amount of games they could have won. So right now we know that the total games were 16. If the total games were 16, they could have won 9, they could have lost 2. So basically we have to make sure we times 60 by 2, 3, 4, 5, and we make sure we just have to find out the number that's closest to 50. And then since it is in ratio, we have to times the left, right, win and lose with the same number as well. So if we do 16 times 2, that would be 32. Okay, that's less than 50. I'll see if I have to consider it. And if I do 16 times 3, that would just be 48. That is also less than 50. So yes, I can consider it. 16 times 4 would just be 64, and that since that's greater than 50, I won't be considering it. So that's a no. Now, since we're finding the highest amount of games they could have won, we have to take the highest amount of total games they've played. Now, we can take 32, but for that, we'll not be getting the highest amount of games they would have won. We'll take the value that's very, very close to 50, so 48. That means I have to times 3 over here. That means I have to do the same thing over there as well because ratios have their own rules. So 9 times 3 is 27. Ratio 16 times 3 we know is 48, and then 2 times 3 is very hard. It's 6. Okay, now we can just see that if the total games were 48, the winning, the total number of games they would have won were 27, and that's the only value we can get. So that's it. That's our answer. 27 total games they could have won according to the ratio, according to the scenario.